Hey everyone, it's me, it's Dan. Just a quick thing to talk about before we get the show rolling this week. I wanted to talk to you about Beyond the Bars, a music nonprofit here in the city. I've talked about them before. You go to beyondthebarsmusic.org. They're a music and career planning program, and they're dedicated to interrupting cycles of violence and incarceration in Philadelphia using music as a way of expression for youth of this city. They have an event coming up this Thursday, October 20th, 5:30 to 7 p.m. at the Community Education Center at 3500 Lancaster Avenue. It's called Celebrating the Impact of Beyond the Bars. It's a community concert. They've been doing this in partnership with CHOP Center for Violence Prevention. So go to beyondthebarsmusic.org for more information about their community concert on October 20th. That's this Thursday from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at the Community Education Center at 3500 Lancaster Avenue. Check it out. Support the nonprofit. It's an outstanding program. I've talked about them before. I'll keep talking about them. I can never say enough things about Beyond the Bars. Go to beyondthebarsmusic.org for more information about the upcoming event this Thursday and just other ways to reach out and support this outstanding organization. All right, let's do it. Let's do the show. Well, hello, and welcome once again to 25 o'clock. I'm your host, Dan Drago. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining me on the show. Here we are, Philadelphia's longest-running music podcast. I think that line gets chirped back to me sometimes by other people. Certainly was this week, and I'll stand by it. You know, sometimes you make something up as a joke and then people keep saying it back to you and immediately you're just like, wow, I wish I'd never made that joke out loud. I'm not regretting this one yet. It seems to be the tagline. It seems to be one of the identifiers of the show here at 25 o'clock. Philly's longest running music podcast, I think. And I'm not going to like 100% unequivocally claim it because I don't know. Maybe someone needs to come out of the woodwork and prove me wrong. Or again, as I've said before, perhaps it is a title that no one cares about defending. Anyway, moving on. Great show this week. I got to talk to Laura Lizcano. I talked to her once before, way back a couple of years ago. She has a new record out. It's called Daughter of the Sea. We'll talk more about Laura and her record and all the cool stuff she's been up to in just a moment. But as always, if you're new to the show, old to the show, medium to the show, I highly recommend you check out 25o'clockpod.com. That's our website. That's our place out there in the interstellar atmosphere that is the World Wide Web. Does anyone even call it that anymore? Wow, Dan, you grew up in the 80s and 90s. Yes, I did. Anyway, 25o'clockpod.com. It's all there. All the episodes are available for streaming and for downloading. You can hook up with us on the social medias. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. I got a link tree. There are probably other things I could have. I don't know. Pitch me on it. Tell me what I should be doing. Should I be doing a TikTok? I don't know how, but if someone tells me and can convince me of its worth, not the worth of TikTok, that's a whole other thing right there, but the worth of me being a part of it at my advanced age of 42 right now, I'm willing to hear it. I'm willing to hear an argument for it. What else can you do there? You sign up for the mailing list. I send out an email every time there's a new episode. I let you know what's going on, and I amuse and entertain you with a few amusing anecdotes, things that pop out of my brain while I'm literally typing the email. And also check out the Friends and Neighbors page on the website. I link anyone and everyone who's ever been on the show. So if you're listening to an episode, a new episode, an old episode, it doesn't matter. And you like the artist, you like what you hear, you want to support them, you want more information, you go to the Friends and Neighbors page. It's a big list now. It's a nice sort of who's who gallery right there. I think so. Of all the people who have been on the show and ways to support them, their websites, how to buy their music, all of that. You can do it all. Absolutely botched the end of that right there. You can do it all at 25o'clockpod.com. Yes. Quick recap. Philly Music Fest is over for the year. Philly Music Fest 2022 has come and gone. It was outstanding. I heard I made it to absolutely zero of the performances that I intended to make it to. I'm going to chalk that up to having a job. If you can get through life not having a job that you have to go to, not having things and responsibilities that can shift suddenly in the beginning or middle of your week, therefore kind of, for lack of a better term, fucking up all the stuff that you wanted to do. If you can get through life without having to experience that, I highly, highly recommend it. And I think it's worth looking into. But yeah, could not make it to any of the performances. Real bummer. There were some people I wanted to meet. I wanted to go out there and meet some people in person for the first time. I wanted to meet Max Swan in person for the first time. He and I had a great conversation earlier in the year. He's got a great record out. It's called Slow Jail. I was really looking forward to meeting him in person. I was really looking forward to hanging out and seeing the Riverby Cats and seeing Empath and Just Mad Nice and seeing Mannequin Pussy at Underground Arts. I was looking forward to all this stuff. None of it happened. But what did happen was I did make it to Inside Hustle. Inside Hustle was the sort of music industry panel, meet and greet, networking event. They had it on Saturday in the afternoon at World Cafe Live downstairs. It was awesome. There was free food. There was coffee. I drank too much of it, got jittery, gave myself a little acid reflux, which turned into a sore throat. So immediately I thought I had COVID after that, but I didn't. I just drank too much coffee. Anyway, I wasn't going to miss that for the world, and I moved heaven and earth to make sure that I could be in attendance and Inside Hustle. And I saw tons of people, musicians, artists, professionals in the music world here in Philadelphia. I want to shout out a few of them. It was great to see you. It was great to see you, Sophie Coran. It was great to see you, Brendan from Stella Ruse. I swear to God, for the first 10 minutes we were hanging out, I could not remember what band you were in or essentially who you were, other than I knew who you were and that we had met before and you had been on the show, and I just had about 10 minutes of petrifying anxiety going all on behind the surface of, I know this guy, he knows me, we're clearly getting along, we're talking about things. How do I know this guy? Brendan from Stella Ruse, Killer Cat. We hung out for a lot of the event. I met Todd from Cambridge Sound Studios. I'd never met him before, but he used to play in a band called New Connection, and my band used to play with his band, and we realized that upon talking. Small world. Got to catch up with Jeff Ziegler real quick. He owns and operates Uniform Recording. Got to see John Batiste for all of 10 seconds. That's all right. We're both busy dudes. Got to say a hi and bye very quickly to Scarlett from Rec Philly. Definitely a very, very cool person who I met very, very recently, and look forward to getting to know her a little more too. And as always, shout outs to my ride or dies, my homies for life, Ash Kernan and Maggie Poulos. Always great to see you guys. Always great to hang out. Gosh, we're getting old. Anyway, that's my take on Inside Hustle for this year. But enough of me yammering about that. Let's talk about Laura. Let's talk about Laura Lizcano, her new record, Daughter of the Sea. It's out now. You can get it anywhere you get digital music. I highly recommend heading over to her Bandcamp, lauralizcano.bandcamp.com. She's got a website, lauralizcanomusic.com. I had her on way back in the day. She was on episode 182 back in the fall of 2020. Her record, Heart, had come out. We talked about that. Go back and listen to that episode. We really don't rehash too much biographical information in this conversation. She's originally from Colombia. She grew up there until she was, I think, maybe 10 or 11. I don't remember. And I had that conversation, but it was 2 years ago. Then grew up in rural Pennsylvania. She's a Temple Music Department alumni. She went there and studied jazz performance. She's an amazing singer, an amazing writer. I got a chance to see her performance of a lot of the songs from the new record as part of the Fringe Festival this year in Philadelphia. It was outstanding. I highly, highly recommend the record. She's got some dates coming up. October 23rd, she's doing her New York City album release at a venue called Groove. And on November 12th, she's doing her Philadelphia album release here at City Winery. Go to lauralizcanomusic.com for more information about that. We talk a lot. We talk a lot about the record. We talk about what she's been doing for the last couple of years. It was great. I went over, sat at the kitchen table with her, and we did the talk. It was just like I used to do it back in the first couple years of this show before I sort of built my little basement layer production studio. It was great to talk to her. It was great to meet her in person, too. We hadn't met back in 2020. We did the conversation virtually. So it was great to meet her finally. Daughter of the Sea, available everywhere you get digital music. lauralizcano.bandcamp.com. Go get it. Go check it out. Let's get to it. Let's get to my kitchen table conversation with Laura Lizcano here on 25 o'clock. So last time I talked to you, I think you were maybe just beginning or in the midst of writing Daughter of the Sea.
Yeah, I had started writing a lot of the songs. Well, not a lot of them, but I had for sure started writing some of them.
Where were you in the you said you were in the process at that point? It was like you had some of them. Did you know it was going to be this whole record, or you were just writing songs because that's what you do?
Yeah, I think I definitely had a feeling that they were all part of some like one thing, like one era of music. I mean, for me, the goal is always to put out records. I just can't quit. Yeah, I think I did have a feeling that all of these were like kind of part of one thing. I maybe I wasn't exactly sure what that thing was going to be yet, but I certainly had a feeling about them.
And because you were by yourself, I mean by yourself being like you weren't able to like access other musicians like in the way that you'd done stuff before. Mm-hmm. Was this writing process pretty different from like when you had done Heart? No,
actually, I think that my process is always like I sit down at the piano and I write by myself. Mm-hmm. And then I make lead sheets and I take them to the band. But I think the songs are pretty complete before I take them to the band. Yeah.
So just like before, like you'd sketched out what the song was going to be in the parts, and then you just sort of hand them out like a musical director.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's kind of like a beautiful part of the process too, is like, you're like, I have this idea for this groove. This is what the structure of the song is. These are like the bare bones. And then kind of collectively as a band, we kind of craft the whole sound together.
Everyone just like brings their particular brand of what it is that they do.
Yeah.
Was it a lot of the same people?
On Daughter of the Sea, yeah, the band is pretty much the same. It's Gusten Rudolph on drums, Joe Plowman on bass, Silas Irvine on the piano, and Dariel Penasic on guitars. Yeah.
Yeah. But when you had written the songs, now I have a little better idea of what your process is. It was still in the middle of, so much uncertainty and everything. Did you, when you finished them, and you made your lead sheets, and you kind of, did it the way you've been doing it up to that point, mm-hmm. Was there a moment you realized like, oh, but I can't do with this what I normally, you can't just get everyone together in a room. You can't just start hashing it out immediately, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think like we were so in it that was just like, I was just kind of waiting until we were all vaccinated. Yeah. I knew that at some point it would come. And I actually, that was very exciting because I was going to have all of this material, this new stuff for folks to play. And that actually was very exciting. But I guess maybe we were so in it that like maybe that wasn't fully part of my thought process yet, is like things are what they are right now. Mm-hmm. But there will be a moment when we'll be able to play all of them together, which was really hopeful, I guess.
Obviously, you guys were all communicating with each other, clearly, and you had sent stuff out and like everyone was starting to get an idea, or were you going to wait till you could get everyone together?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like it wasn't until, March 2021 when we all started getting vaccinated that I started being like, okay, I think that maybe we can start getting together, and that's when I started putting together all of like the thoughts around what was actually gonna go into the recording process. Mm-hmm. So we started rehearsing in like late April of 2021. That's like the first time we got together. and I only sent the charts out like a few weeks beforehand, and I had gotten together with Joe a couple times before. Like, he was like one of the first people I knew who had been vaccinated, and so I felt safe getting together with him.
Yeah.
And we had kind of like played through the stuff together. Like, I played a lot of it for him on the piano, and we had come up with all these kind of like reference recordings of what we wanted the music to sound like. So I think like we went into the rehearsal process very prepared for what we wanted the music to sound like.
How does the process then go? You rehearse with the group, and then obviously next you record.
We spent some time rehearsing the tunes. I just feel like I really just wanted the band to feel comfortable playing the tunes before we were in the studio, because I didn't want to waste any time being like, let's like, without even being able to get through the tune.
Yeah.
Like, you pay all this money to be in the studio, like, why wouldn't you come prepared?
Let's not figure out what we're going to do here. And that's the joy. If you do that in the rehearsal room, it's free, or, it's the clock isn't running.
Yeah.
So everyone can have ideas. You can throw stuff. You can go and try things and then abandon them, because if it's not working, it's not working, and not feel like, oh, well, we just wasted an hour on an idea we're not even gonna do.
Right.
It's always freeing to do that. And then you go in the studio and you're just laser focused.
Yeah, and I think, there was definitely, like, the first thing that we did was just we recorded basically like the bare bones of all of the tracks, which then allowed us to go back and start layering things on top, which again was something that I hadn't had the opportunity to do before, just hadn't had like the resources to spend that much time in the studio before. So instead of just playing all of these tunes like they were jazz standards, like, the intention was to do multiple passes of them, to add layers on top. And that was actually a very fun part of the process, was all of us being able to add things along the way. So yeah, that was really awesome.
Yeah, and the whole point of like bringing these particular players together is that you bring them together for a reason, because you like what each one of them do individually. So it's just nice to be able to like turn over the sections and just be like, you go nuts.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you had mentioned when I saw you perform on Thursday, you had said something on stage about how it was hard, like it was a more difficult recording process than maybe you would have thought. What was that about?
Well, I think I just got very ambitious. I think I was like very excited about finally being able to do stuff after being in lockdown. And I had part of the vision of this record was to have a string quartet on it. And again, like, that's not something I have ever done before.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't like a roadmap or a guide as to how to do this. I was very lucky to have Aaron Bush as a collaborator on this record, because Aaron wrote these interludes that kind of go in between some of the songs. And basically the only guidance I gave her was like, I really like Carolyn Shaw and I really like this specific record, and I want these little like 30 to 1 minute interludes to go in between these songs, like, do something.
Make it.
And yeah, exactly. And then which she was super on board for. And then the other piece of it was that she also wrote an arrangement for the title track of the record, Blood is Thicker Than Water. And yeah, again, it's just like, one, recording the stuff in the studio, like, knowing that there are gonna be strings and like kind of leaving space for what that might look like was kind of tough, because I think we all wanted to like really shape the tunes, but also had to kind of imagine what those strings might sound like. So I think that part of the process was a little bit hard, like trusting that there were gonna be things there eventually.
Well, because so often, like, and especially with the way that I imagine at the level you'd been up to that point recording, is that like you go in the studio and then when you come out, it's all there. Like you know what you're listening to, you know what it is, you know if you got it. And yeah, to like walk away with it sort of nebulous right there, being like, well, something's going there. I hope it sounds good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so basically Erin held my hand through a lot of the process. And
how did you meet her?
Well, she's Jake Kelberman's partner, and I met Jake in school. And I knew that Erin was a composer and that she really loved a lot of the same music that I was into, and I just had like I was just interested in working with her. I had heard some of her stuff. I'd known some of her work, and I just thought that it would be very much aligned with what I was trying to do.
Is she part of the Daedalus Quartet?
No, but Erin goes to Penn. She's a PhD composer student at Penn, and Daedalus Quartet is the resident quartet there. And through that relationship was how we were able to bring them onto the project.
It sounds really good. I really do love the interludes, and not just for the music itself. The music itself is gorgeous, but the fact that they're just there. I always like that in records, like little bits of instrumental interludes that aren't like, they don't carry the same weight as a song, you know?
Yeah.
But they're not throwaway. Like, that's the other thing. You have to be careful not to, or that you don't want to present them in a way where they seem like, you know, you can skip through this if you don't want to hear this part, you know, kind of thing. I really like that. I like creative choices, not just in song arrangements, but in just like album ordering and even just like how you're going to do it. Because I feel like, I'm sure you think this too. I mean, you probably are like me and still listen to a lot of stuff in album form.
Yeah.
But while everything shifts to the single, the playlist and all that, those little interstitial things that like pull stuff together. I can't remember who I talked to recently who also did. It was Jordan from Mo Loud and the Humble, and he has an EP where the middle track is just this little minute and a half kind of ambient instrumental, and it just ties the songs together really well. Yeah. And that's what you did too. Like, I thought that was great. And now to know that like Aaron had written the string music and you had written all the songs. Mm-hmm. And but to us as a listener, we just fill in the blanks, and we're just like, oh, well, this is all from the same mind, you know. Yeah, it's kind of how it flows and feels.
I think exactly what you're saying. I think I was very intentional in that I wanted an album. Like, I wanted folks to listen to it from beginning to end and feel like it was a one complete cohesive piece, like work of art.
Yeah.
And because I do feel like this sort of resistance to like singles. Like the culture around singles where it's like we listen to one song and like we make it go viral on TikTok and we only listen to like 15 seconds of it.
Just the hook.
Which, you know, is fine. Like, to each their own. And I think like...
Is it?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just like part of me just like really craves to spend more time with things, you know? And I think like we're always so fast-paced about everything, and we're running from one place to the other, and even the way that we consume content, it's like, even when you read an article, you like only skim it, and I think I sometimes feel very resistant to that, in that I really wanted to make something that where the listener could like just really spend time with it, and
you're less likely to think of things as disposable if it demands more of your attention and more of your time. I've said this before constantly. It's like music, like the actual sound of music is everywhere. It's everywhere you go. You're in the grocery store and there's music. It's been carefully curated for, you know, your grocery shopping experience. And you go to Starbucks and there's music on, and you don't pay attention to any of it. Yeah. You forget it. Like I was in a Starbucks this morning. I couldn't tell you what was playing. Or I was in the store. I couldn't tell you what was playing. So every once in a while when you hear something weird and you're just like, what's this doing here? But when you make a work from start to finish and something that's, you know, longer than a single, it's like you're sort of demanding that, like, no, pay attention to this. And that's good. Like, I think sometimes we need to rely on artists to kind of like take us by the collar and just be like, no, pay attention to this. I've done something here. Yeah. Just give it more than 15 seconds, essentially, right there. Yeah. And then in the meantime, while you're putting the record together and all that, you were composing for Almanac Dance Circus too, right?
Yeah. So in 2021 is when I started writing. I started working with Almanac Dance Circus Theater, which is a dance circus theater troupe in
a lot of movement and jumping and like just from watching your video, catching each other, and a lot of good like people who are limber and can move their legs properly and all that,
who are just like super strong and flexible and all the things,
but none of them particularly large, so the amount of strength, like I watched some of the things. I went and watched the video again, particularly in like some of the more larger dance sequences, the video for Major Tom, and me thinking like, how do they do that? They're like half the size of me.
I know.
I contain all this energy and strength.
It's like continuously what I love about working with them. I'm just like so amazed by what they can do. And being with them in the room sometimes is really such an exhilarating experience because it's so, again, like it's so different when you see a performance in person.
Yeah.
Because you can see them shaking, you can see them sweating, you can see them breathing, you can see them like communicating just by gazing at each other. And they're like, you know that like a big trick is going to come up and that they're going to toss someone in the air. And you're going to be like, are they going to catch them? Yes, they did. Okay, good. And part of the process of working with them was that I got to see a lot of them just like working out these tricks, you know? So a lot of them for me were sometimes scary to watch.
Oh yeah. Because you're in rehearsal. You would think at least by the time you get to the performance, like as someone in the audience, to be like, well, they've done this a bunch of times. Yeah. Everything's going to be fine. Yeah. But for you to be there in like the proto version of it, you're just like, oh, I'm seeing the stuff that we're not supposed to see.
Yeah.
Like, how does that help inform like writing? How do you write music to dance?
They work with improvisational techniques, and their whole philosophy is that like they write the show together. Mm-hmm. So before they start rehearsals, there's really only like an idea about what the theme of the show is. But then together they kind of craft the whole show together. So from in the beginning, you have no idea what it's going to look like once, like at the end of the rehearsal process. And so that was part of it for me too. I had to kind of like come into rehearsals not knowing what I was going to write for. Yeah. But that was super interesting. So eventually what I ended up doing was just like I had kind of crafted these sort of open-ended tracks on Logic where I could just kind of like loop sections, and part of it was like looped with my voice, with my I have like a TC Helicon loop station, and so I used that, and I used like these tracks on Logic, and then I asked Gusten to write some beats because that's not one of my skills. I can't do it all. So he wrote some beats for me that I was using on these tracks. And again, they were just kind of like very open-ended and abstract because like, as I was mentioning, like we don't know what the end product is going to be. Yeah. And some of the songs that are in the show that I worked on with them called Happy Hour, some of them do feel like more complete songs, but some of them are very, very open-ended and loose.
Do you find that they're also responding to what you bring to them too? And so it's this sort of feedback loop right there where
for sure.
No one knows not what they're doing. No one knows what it's going to be, except in the end, everyone's just feeding off of everyone's input.
Yeah, I think especially that there were like a few pieces in that show that were supposed to be improvisational. Like there was a clear beginning, but there was no clear ending. And so like everything in between could really go in like a million different directions. So yes, for sure, I think we were responding to each other, and part of my job was to kind of provide more of a supporting role for them. But yeah, for sure, 100% we were feeding from each other.
Were you making like real distinct rhythmic choices? Because obviously rhythmic choices are very much going to dictate, how dancing is going to go. Or did you try to leave them a little more vague and I guess ambient for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I mean, some of them were definitely very ambient. But the ones that Gusten had written beats for, those were very much like the rhythm was that, you know? And we had kind of made some choices about like, BPM beforehand with the dance troupe. And yeah, so some of those choices were made before we were kind of in the thick of it. But yeah, it's like, my answer to you is like it's all very loose and not unlike anything that you have heard me do before.
Oh, sure, yeah. And it's like, and it's not to say that if you making choices like BPMs or like time signatures or something like that then robs it of its of its improvisation. If anything, and I said this recently to someone because I thought of something that someone said to me years and years ago when I was interviewing them, and they said limitation. When you butt up against your limitations, that's where creativity comes from. And so if the limitation is it's 140 BPM and it's in 3/4, like that's a limitation, but it's like then you're just like, all right, what can we do within this little box that we've created for ourselves right here?
Yeah, exactly. I think those kind of parameters, those rules are actually super helpful because you're not starting from zero.
Yeah, I think it's in fact it's incredibly difficult to improvise or to be like spontaneous when some choices haven't already been made.
Yeah.
I mean, you know this from having studied jazz. At least like in jazz, the choices are like, well, these are the instruments we're playing. So we're somewhat confined in, is it a trio? Is it a quartet? Is it, things like that. But yeah, in that, I think it gets real fun because you start kind of butting up against what you can do. And then suddenly you can do something that you didn't think you could do.
Exactly.
It's just got to be wild to like have this music that you created and just watch these people just fling themselves around.
Yeah, it was honestly like, it was hard, but it has been one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life, has been that collaborative relationship with Almanac. Not just from the creative side, but I think just as human beings, as like their philosophies around art making and community, it's just like so special and radical and necessary. And yeah, I just love the work that they're doing, and I feel very grateful to be part of their world.
Yeah, it is good to sort of mix it up with other kinds of artists, even just outside the music world. Because as musicians, we can kind of get stuck in like, well, this is how we do things, and this is how we relate to each other, and this is how the professional infrastructure works and all that. And then to walk into dance and just be like, oh, I have no idea what this is. Well, not I have no idea, but you're just like, this isn't my world.
Yeah.
That's got to be very fun, and to the right person, very freeing.
Yeah. It certainly was for me.
Have you kind of brought any of that, like the way you sort of approached writing for them, and then have you brought it back into your own writing?
I don't think like writing wise, because I still very much see myself as a songwriter, and I feel like that process is so entrenched into like my own practice. I feel like the work that I did with Almanac was like its own thing, very much for sure. I think what has changed for me is my attitude around, maybe more of like the business stuff, or more of like, how I see the music industry is like, I feel like we're limiting ourselves so much. Like here's Almanac showing us like a model that could really work.
What's their model?
So they're the masterminds behind Cannonball Fest, which is where you attended, and their whole philosophy is that like everybody kind of contributes to the pot, and then you all like distribute those resources. So they have kind of different tiers for artists to buy into the festival.
Oh yeah.
Which I think Nick maybe talked to you.
Yeah, he was
a little
explaining
bit
that to me. He was the first person who managed to explain to me kind of the way the Philly Fringe Arts and the things around it are working now, because I was involved years ago in various other projects, and it was run very differently, probably more like a standard theater festival.
Yeah.
Whereas now it seems to be a little, not scattered, because scattered gives the wrong connotation, but like it's not as regimented as it was before. And there's a lot of different kinds of things happening, whereas before it was a little more theater or performance arts based. But what you did was you basically did a show, like you did a concert, almost like a cabaret style, and not even in the style of like a one woman performance art or something like that. It was like a show, probably not too dissimilar from if I were to go see you at City Winery or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, again, like that's what's so special about Cannonball is like, not that there aren't any rules, but like there isn't this kind of like notion of like you have to fit into this very specific track to be part of like our thing. And I think something that they're very aware of is that producers, like there aren't producers out there or agents out there who are like actively looking for people to promote. Like that's not really a part of,
it's not really the model anymore.
It's not really a part of the artistic world, really. I mean, it's like a very small amount of people who are privileged enough to have that relationship with a producer or an agent or a label, whatever it might be. And so what happens is that a lot of us are self-producing our own work. We're our own producers, our own everything. Without the support of, a label or whatever it might be. So I think Almanac is very aware of that, and they are very much trying to create a community in which independent artists can thrive, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, it's not dissimilar to like getting kind of back to like sort of the European spirit of the Fringe Fest, of like Edinburgh Fringe and stuff like that, where it was literally just like, well, it goes between this day, and it's in this general part of the city. So anything you go to, and that is, technically part of Fringe. And going back to what you're saying, it's not everyone's fortunate enough to have that infrastructure of, you say, like a record label or production company to not only supply money, but to help make decisions and things like that. Like you said, you self-produce your own show, and that's not dissimilar to any other band out there where you're just like, they're producing their own records, they're running their own tours, they're taking care of their own merch, the visual component of that, social media, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so what you say is like Cannonball, Almanac, they kind of like provide a little bit of infrastructure for people who just, because you don't need everything, but you just need a little bit here and there. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I think like they take care of the biggest things, which is like the space.
Yeah.
And
some promotion.
The most expensive thing is often the space, right?
Yeah.
They're providing tech people. They're like those are things that I feel like folks don't generally think about.
Until you're doing it and you're just like, oh, I need someone to do that, and I should probably pay them some money.
Exactly. So I think that makes it so much more feasible.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's a little more in the spirit of like what I know being a little bit more of like European performance art and stuff like that, a little more collective, a little more, for lack of a better term, socialist. I don't know, like that has connotations to it. They're not negative to me, but they could be negative to other people. But it is sort of that, like I said, we all contribute into the pot, and then what you need, then we figure it, we figure it out from there, which is a lot better than going out being like, well, I need this and I need that, and I need someone to give it to me. And then you feel like part of it too, like, and not just part of your own show, but then like part of your friends' shows or your contemporary shows, and it's all. And then everyone just feels good about each other all the time.
Yeah, exactly. It just fosters a very positive community environment.
It has to be a community. I've said this before 1,000 times. It's like, ain't none of us quitting our jobs or like making a ton of money off doing what we do. So in the meantime, as we try and figure out a way to make it work for us, it's got to be fun and uplifting and like and positive. It has to be a positive relationship between everyone you're working with, or else, as I say, I'm like, it's just going to work, and a lot of us already do that.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Like you and Nick have finally explained to me what is going, because I could not figure it out for I'm like, what are they doing? Like, where's the schedule? Is that the schedule? And then I would look, I was like, but there's 5 other things that aren't on the schedule. What's happening? And like, for me as a control person, I'm like, how is this even working? And then when it was explained to me a little better, I'm like, oh, I see. They're not wrong.
No.
I need to alter how I'm going at this right here. Which is a lesson as I get older, I relearn constantly.
Yes, we're all constantly relearning.
Yeah. Maybe my way is not the way that everyone else does things.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That was great. Like I said, the show was outstanding. I really, really liked just the vibe and the feel of it too. Just being outside in a courtyard. There were like plants growing up the walls and all that. And you guys just had that very simple, like just sort of canopy and the lights. And it was perfect. And you had that backdrop of the stairway behind you, which I'm sure was just simply where you set up. But it was really nice. It was just nice to have that kind of depth of field and everything. Instead of, and instead of, the chandelier. And instead of just, like a lot of times you play clubs and stuff like that, you're standing in front of like a flat black background. It was nice to have like a little vibe right there.
That space is so beautiful, for sure.
Did you sort of pick it, or did you just kind of show up and be like, I guess this is where we're doing it?
No, I wanted to do it at the garden.
Yeah.
Because the other options were to do it in the studio at Moss or to do it at Icebox, which is not very far from the Moss building. But I had very specifically wanted to do it in the garden, and I think it was also connected to kind of what the album is about.
Yeah.
So I kind of saw it as sort of the complete picture of it all. I wanted it to be really intimate. I wanted it to feel very earthy. I wanted, to hear like the bugs and the fire crackling and
the bus. I didn't
maybe
actually
not
hear
necessarily the bus, but
it's all part of it though.
But yeah, I very much envisioned us in that space, especially with like the string sound. It was
very resonant.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes simple is better.
Yeah, like I said, really remarkable. And I love that the only phone that went off in the middle of the show was your mom, which was the only person who can get away with that. I said that to like people around. I go, she's literally the only person here who can get away with that. The rest of if one of our phones went off, we'd have to go.
I would would have kicked you out.
Yeah.
No, I'm
But
just
Laura's
kidding.
mom, she stays.
Yes, yes.
It was just such a mom moment right there.
Yeah, it was very
really
cute.
great.
It was very sweet.
Yeah, yeah. And she was there right there front and center, which I thought was great. Everyone was like everyone was just dialed in. Like, and I was sitting off the side and I had my phone out because I was making notes. I wanted to make some notes, especially as you were talking about the record and things like that, obviously, because I knew we were going to talk later. I was like, I should make some notes and not rely 100% on my memory. And then occasionally people were like sneaking glances at me. I'm like, oh, great. They think I'm that jerk who's like sitting at this intimate, quiet performance and I'm texting or something like that.
LOL.
So I was like, I can't explain myself right now, so this is just how I'm going to appear for the evening.
No, it's all good. I like didn't even notice.
I didn't think you were gonna notice. I just like there are people in the audience I could tell like kind of give me like, what's he doing over there with it? Can't get off his phone. I'm like, I was like, no, I'm here for professional reasons and also to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I felt bad afterwards. I'm like, what are you gonna do? And then we all forgot about each other 10 minutes later. So
Exactly.
the moral of that story is no one's really thinking of you. So
Exactly.
yeah. Well, and on the record too, and you talked about it a little bit when you were up there performing, some of the bigger themes that you were kind of working with here, and the thing that I liked that you told, personal stories about yourself and how you felt about yourself physically. Which is always, some pretty vulnerable stuff to get into, especially in front of strangers. But I definitely gave you marks for that, and I just thought it was great and an honest thing, and because there's no one in that room or in the world that hasn't had those exact same thoughts about whatever it is about themselves. I love the way you framed it. It's like my whole childhood is like, well, what are we going to do about this?
Yeah. That's such a feel, especially for women. And maybe I'm sounding outdated now because I should say for people in general.
It's true, yeah.
But I think maybe for young girls, I don't think I'm wrong about that specifically, but there is this kind of expectation that young girls are pristine and perfect, and like little girls should look very specific ways.
Yeah.
And I certainly grew up with sort of those expectations, and as an adult thinking about it, like the more and more I'm baffled by it, because it's like, as someone who grew up in Colombia, like just thinking how those American standards of beauty, how much also they permeated into my own culture in Colombia. And like that to me is like a little bit crazy and something that I sometimes have to wrap my head around, but like how strong that ideal of beauty is, even in a completely different country, right? Like the power of media and standards from the US. And I think like, especially like things around body hair and weight, those are things that for me have always been very prominent and present in my life. And again, I was telling that story that when I got my first gray hair during the pandemic, I started kind of realizing like these are things that I can't change, and I've been trying to mold myself and my body in a way into this like unattainable standard, but also not even for myself, like for others.
So for nearly anyone,
and so that others might love me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is something that really breaks my heart for young girls and young women, is like this idea that like we want to like keep them innocent and precious and make them look this very specific way, but like for who, right?
Yeah.
Like my question is always like, for who? For certainly not for them.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that I really wanted to reclaim for myself, was the ownership of my own body. And so I wrote that song Quiet Love as kind of part of that, and not just about my those parts of my body that I have had trouble loving, but also because I think that in this body I've like sometimes the messaging is like, well, men aren't gonna like you, and then you're not gonna experience pleasure and desire, and you're not someone who will experience those things in your life because of the way that you look. And part of the reason I wrote that song is like, actually, yes, like look at me enjoying my body and also like being desirable. And the lyrics are very intentional in that way. Like they're very sexualized because I wanted to show that these things are not just beautiful but also sexy.
Yeah, yeah. And there are other songs on the record as well that kind of tap into that, where sometimes a man can write those kind of songs, no problem, and they've been writing them forever, and it's no one remarks on them in the same way that, you know, if a woman or a more feminine identifying person would write them. And that was something I was thinking about. There was the one kind of like bluesy song that you did with just you and the guitar player, which is probably my favorite performance of the night, just because, I mean, your vocals were amazing and he just killed it. Like, just the way he hit it. And I was like, oh, this is great. Because it is hard to kind of do a song like that, a little bit more of a, like kind of a raucous barroom kind of blues type of tune with just you and one other instrument. But you guys pulled it off. Like you not only filled the room with sound, the arrangement was like spot on. It was exactly what it needed to be. Nobody did. You guys weren't trying to cover for things that you weren't there. You just accepted what wasn't there and moved forward anyway. And in that, I think you got a really, really excellent performance.
And yeah, again, like that song is very much about desire and specifically about sexual desire, right? So again, like that's something that I felt that I've always had to hide, right?
I think most women think that, yeah.
And then, again, when I was writing the song, I was like, why? Like, why? I'm a grown woman. I don't have to hide my sexuality, right? So I think I really love singing that song because it is very empowering in that way. It feels true. Yeah.
And hopefully empowering to others to hear it too. It's like, well, if she can sing a song about it, then someone would feel like, well, I can go out and be it. I can go out and, you know, think those things and feel those things and all that, and it's fine. I think that's always the thing.
Very much women in media and whatever you want to call it, like they're not serving themselves often, right? They're serving, again, like with this like higher ideal of like what beauty is. Yeah,
there's a beauty standard that you're trying to hit, but it's sort of a one size fits all, and obviously there's more than infinite number of sizes and varieties of people.
Yeah, and it's so interesting you say that because I was watching these TikToks about Lizzo and like this, I forget exactly what dress she was wearing to what specific event, but it was quite a very like large opulent dress. Yeah. And there were lots of people saying how like, oh well, that's a horrible dress, whatever. And then there was like a stitch of Lizzo reacting to somebody else explaining why she was wearing this dress. And it was like, well, it's because large women and women, specifically women of color, aren't allowed to take up space. And here's Lizzo saying like, I'm going to take
this dress is going to take up all the
space as I want, and I'm going to look very beautiful doing it. And I feel very connected to that because that's something in my life that I have always had to struggle, like battle up against. Is like, you're too loud, you're too Latina, you're too you speak too much Spanish, or you don't speak enough Spanish, or your English is, you know, like all these things that like make you feel small, like you're taking up too much space, you're being too much of something. And again, like for me, that's like such and I'm sorry that I'm cursing, but it's bullshit.
No, you say bullshit. Yeah, I was gonna say absolutely. Yeah, let's call it what it is.
And so I just think like such a big part of making this record for me is kind of that big Lizzo dress energy, is that I want to take up as much space as I can being my authentic self. Yeah. And again, like the record feels like very grand to me, and I wanted it to be very opulent and grand. Yeah. For that very reason, is because I, as a human being, am complex, and I am allowed to take up space.
And it makes sense that you would fill it not only with your songs, with those interludes as well, to like to create more space in between the songs, in between in between the individual tracks and all that, because it's not in between every track, but you kind of pick these really excellent points to drop it in there. And sort of the lengths of the interludes as well, they vary. They're not all just short, choppy little things. Some are shorter. One's almost a full song length right there. Yeah. And it's your way of being like, no, we're going to take our time here. Yeah. This is going to be a whole thing when we're done, and it's not necessarily going to fit into a small, digestible thing. Exactly. This small thing that maybe society wants you, the space it wants you to occupy. You're like, no, we will not be occupying that space. We'll be occupying much more space than that.
Yeah, and
I like Lizzo-dress-energy. That's a really great way to put it.
And more than just like occupying much more space than that, it's like occupying my own space.
Well, yeah. You're not taking someone else. That was yours to begin with. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. No, that makes a lot more sense now on the record, and just how you sequenced it the way that you did, and the decisions that you made in making it. And like Heart, I think when I talked to you about Heart, I said the thing I loved the most about Heart was just how the rhythm breathed rather than felt like, and that when I listened to this new record and I listened to Heart, I was like, it's still there. Good. Like that kind of, that thing I always chase in Latin music is just that particular rhythm, not particular Latin rhythms, but just the way it relates with everything else happening. I don't think we do that as much in more standard like American Western music.
I sometimes I feel like I also, that's like a thing in my career that I sometimes have had to like fight against a little bit too, is like, because I'm Colombian, then like
we music, assume that it has to
like sound whatever that means that it has to sound Latin. I'm like, well, I've actually spent like my entire artistic career here in the States, and
particularly in Philly too. So.
And so I sometimes it like confuses me a little bit. It doesn't confuse me. I would just love to kind of again like redirect that conversation around like, it's Colombian because I'm Colombian.
Yes.
But it's not like traditional Latin American music. For 100%, that is not what we were trying to do.
Of course not. And I didn't mean to give the impression that that's what I thought about the music, because I know that's definitely something that I think we even talked about that before. We talked a couple years ago. I sure wasn't saying you're making a Latin record. No, because it is a pop record. It's all the things that, like, I can hear all the things that you've learned just throughout, not just in school, but just in living in the world and listening to pop music and being the age that you are, and having gone to like a conservatory style music school and learned jazz.
Yeah.
And all the things that is.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, this record definitely feels like a collage to me. And it's interesting because during lockdown, I was making a lot of collages, so it's interesting.
Yeah, I remember you told me that. Yeah,
which is interesting how that kind of permeated into this larger project. Interesting how the brain works.
Making patterns out of seemingly chaos.
So I think it's just, in that sense, I think the record is, to me, it's incredibly special. I feel like as a human being, I've always seen myself as fractured, right? Like, there's like the American part of me and there's the Colombian part of me, right? And I have always struggled to kind of find the cohesiveness and union of those two things. But I feel like the older I get, the more like they feel unified. And I feel like this record really, I think, speaks to that cohesiveness of me as a person. And, that's something that I really, really wanted to get across in the record as a whole. And again, like, that's exactly why I love the fact that it feels like a collage.
Well, yeah, it has all those elements because, like you said, it has those Latin elements, but it has the pop elements, and it has like the strong vocal performance elements. And then moving back into like the real like canon of Western music, of string quartet and like type of music and all that, you just put it all together and you're just like, well, this is me.
Yeah.
And people say, which part? And you're just like, all of it. Because why would you make it?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's a really great record. I really do enjoy it. And having heard the previous record too and spent time with that as well, it's interesting to hear them together and see progression is sort of a cliche thing, but I also don't know a better term. It's like you progress, you make one record, and that's the thing you're making at the time. You were a different person when you made that. It was earlier. It was before the pandemic, and it came out in kind of the midst of it, and you had to kind of grapple with how you did that too.
Yeah.
And now things are different. The way it got made was different, but now you're putting it out, and you're going to play shows. You're going to be in New York, and you're going to play one here in Philly as well. Yeah. And you're writing music for other shows too, not just the one Almanac dance. You've got the other one coming up.
So I wrote music for a musical called Man of La Mansion, which is a camp comedy horror musical about a woman who kidnaps Senator Joe Manchin, brings him back to her apartment, and slowly eats him alive on a live stream. Yeah. It's really great.
No, it is. Yeah. Now that's what Fringe is about right there. Just like that pitch right there. It's just like, oh yeah, she eats a hated senator live on the internet for everyone. You're just like, that's what I was missing.
Yes. So Nick, who you met, Nick Jongzak, is the mastermind behind that musical. He wrote the book, the script, and he had asked me to write some songs for it. And anyway, it was one of the most fun things I have ever done, ever.
Yeah.
And yeah, it feels kind of surreal that it's like being actually being performed.
Yes.
For the listeners out there, just so you know, it's actually very, very funny. And
I think it's very funny.
The couple showings that we have done of the music, like, people are just laughing the whole time. And of course, like, some of the subject matter is very serious, but I think that's what has allowed Nick to deliver kind of his message around the whole thing is the campy and the funny.
Yeah.
Because some of these things are very so horrific and hard to digest that I think it's wrapped in this very funny envelope that is much easier to digest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, both sort of the camp style of humor and then also horror as well are both two excellent examples of how one takes, real life hard stuff and distills it into a way that's palatable. And maybe people don't always think of horror movies as palatable, but like that's a way of taking realized fears and making them in a way that you can actually like deal with it.
Yeah.
Because it's so over the top,
exactly.
Either in shock or in comedy. But yeah, no, that's great. I'll have to get out and see that.
It's very special, I have to say. I've been very grateful to have been able to go to rehearsals and things, and just seeing it come together has been such a joy. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to talk real briefly about the video for Major Tom. I finally watched it this morning. And you worked with Matt Keppler on that.
I did.
And Matt is a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him much over the last few years in the way that none of us have really seen much of each other over the last few years. But I've always admired him as a musician and as an artist. And for him to be, I kind of know his trajectory right now with the production company, with Drew and all that, and like what they're doing right there. I just thought it was great when I saw his name appear. I was like, oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because you're a creative person, and he's a very creative person. And I was like, oh well, this will only lead to something awesome.
I hired Keppler because I had seen a music video that he had done for Taylor Kelly. Like, oh well, it probably makes sense for Keppler to also do this music video, and we had kind of listened to a couple songs, and at first I had wanted to make a music video for Blood is Thicker Than Water, but then I also threw Major Tom in there because I knew that he was a little bit of a sillier soul.
Yeah. Yes, he is. Yes.
and he was like, he messaged me back and was like, both of these songs are amazing. I think the music, I'm happy to make a music video for either one, but I think the music video that I really want to make with you is Major Tom.
Yeah.
I really took that like it's so important to work with people who want to work on something, like, and that specific song called to him was like, kind of like, okay, yeah, let's redirect and let's make this music video. And actually it was super fun.
Yeah, it looked fun too. And again, the whole idea of like, because you use the dancers, but you employ the dancers almost like pieces of the stage dressing, like they're part of the set, not dissimilar to the Bowie video for Black Star that I know that you're, if not obliquely referencing. It's something that definitely influenced you guys, that and the Tune Yards video as well.
Yeah.
With the kicking. That's always the thing. It's like, oh, the floor kicking.
Yeah, I think definitely. So both of those videos were references for this music video. I think for me, because I was definitely not contributing, but trying to play into the canon of Space Oddity.
Yeah.
I had something that was so special for me about listening to Black Star and watching all of the music videos around that record was how much that specific album was referencing other things from his career. Like, it almost felt like a retrospective to me in a way.
It's like he was trying to get the final word in on a bunch of stuff, because as we learned later, he knew what was coming.
Yeah.
But we didn't, or it was like rumored. and all that. It's just such a and like just to go down a Bowie rabbit hole for just such a remarkable last thing to leave.
Yeah.
Because it's so out there and so arty in like all the great ways. And the musicians that he put together to play on it, those New York players, like just so, you don't want to throw around the term avant-garde because like it just, who knows what that means. And it just, sometimes it's just a word that people throw out there because they don't have a smarter word to throw out. But it was just so out there and so very him, very Bowie right there to like leave that as like not even a final word, but just like a last calling card or something like that. I'd be like, here you go, I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, again, like just like you, I was like extremely intrigued. That music video for Black Star for me, I was like, all the Easter eggs, right? Yeah. I was like, okay, what does that mean? I've probably watched the video like a million times. Yeah. But in the video for Black Star, you see like a space suit that is covered in jewels. And I was like, okay, Major Tom, ? And then later in the video, again, like, the dancers that are back on Earth with David Bowie, they're kind of, I think, playing his emotional state because he's very scared. Some song about his cancer. Yeah. And then, like, this when we're in space again in the music video, then there are these, like, kind of alien people with tails. Yeah. And I was like, okay. What is happening here? Yeah. So for me, I mean, again, it's my interpretation. And I think obviously Bowie left it behind that way because he wanted different people to interpret different things from it, and only he knows the true meaning of it. Was that for me, I was like, well, maybe Major Tom at least made it somewhere. And
he's like still up there. Yeah.
Yeah, or maybe even if he had maybe even died, but like clearly like some aliens found him because like why is he decorated, right? Yeah. Why does he have all these jewels on him? So anyway, that kind of like my imagination was just kind of like spinning on that. And then definitely when I was writing the song, there are all those question marks, right? Of like, for like whoever was left behind, like, are you lonely up there? Are you hungry? Are you scared? And so, I think I very much wondered that. And then when we were making the video, that narrative kind of came about of like, well, this is sung from the perspective of Major Tom's wife, who's like left behind, and she's wondering all of these things about what happened to him. Yeah. And the dancers in the music video definitely play Major Tom's wife's emotional state, right? She's depressed, she misses him, they're like getting in her way. She's like
going through the motions of like just daily domestic life.
Exactly.
And all that. And it was remarkable.
Thank you.
And it looked great, and that's the thing, like with music videos, since like there really is no major outlet for them anymore now, except for, like YouTube or TikTok, which is, to me, I think it's not a curated output. It's literally a pile of everyone's music videos, and you can go find them if you know what to look for. But when you make things like small films, kind of what they were originally, not what they originally meant to be, but what they were kind of in like the classic MTV era, where like it stops being just a simulated live performance of bands, and they look at the camera and they all look very good, and we use it to sell records. When like people started making little films. I was thinking of like ZZ Top videos or something like that, where they're like these little stories, or like the Van Halen video, because I was a kid of the 80s, like they had little stories that were like kind of about the song, but maybe not really. Yeah. Yeah. And in the 90s and like a lot of the grunge band videos and all that, you're just like, oh, this has nothing to do with what you're singing about. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's like I also just love film, and I'm like a huge movie buff, and I think Keppler and I also connected over our love of David Lynch, and even when we were in the studio, like Dariel plays that line in the song, bum 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 bum, that I was like, that is 100% Twin Peaks, and I kept it because I was like, yes, I want there to be like little Easter eggs in there. I want people to think that they were on purpose.
Well, it's just little reference points, and they're just there, and most people will miss them, and that's fine. Like they didn't enjoy the song incorrectly, but it's that little something there for the people. It's almost like it's like a little dog whistle for people like you. Yeah. Who hear the same stuff that you do. And like when you meet people who notice that stuff, you're just like, oh, good. All right. Yeah. We're on the same page here.
yeah, it was again like such a joy to work with Keppler, and very much all of us were kind of in the same energies around the video, so it was a great experience.
Yeah, like I said, it's a great video. It's a great record. The show was good. And you got shows coming up when the record comes out.
The record comes out October 14th. Yeah.
And I know you got a show in New York and then a show here. How's the back and forth between New York and Philly going? Is it exhausting?
Yeah, yes. Especially because now I have like a whole ass full-time job.
Yeah.
And
is that's what brought you up to New York?
Actually, my partner Sam, he's like going to Brooklyn College. He's a film composer.
Oh, cool.
And he's doing a master's in media composition. So that's truly actually what brought us to New York. And
well, it's good you get to do it together too.
Yeah.
It wasn't like one of you got a job and then like you kind of, because you hear that story constantly, people kind of making it work, going back and forth. And obviously, the distance between Philly and New York City is not the grandest distance in the world, but it still ain't nothing.
Yeah, but it's still 2 hours.
It's also emotionally far away from each other.
Yeah, and at first, because I lived in Philly for so long. I lived in Philly for almost 8 years.
Yeah.
And I tell people this all the time, is like I consider Philly my hometown, like truly this is where I feel like I grew up and became a person.
Yeah.
So it was very hard for me at first to leave. I think 1 year into it, I'm like, New York is awesome.
Yeah.
Like
it's New York.
I'm really loving it there. I'm very grateful to be able to work out like a situation where I'm able to come back to Philly when I want to, and still have my life in New York. It's like, I mean, it's certainly not perfect, but it's
but what is?
Again, nothing is perfect, but I think, yeah, I'm just in constant amazement of how like my life has taken this road and this shape, specifically because I'm an artist, and I feel very lucky in that way.
Yeah, especially as a performer and as a student of music and all that, like as a student of jazz too. There's so many amazing things that have come from New York. So the idea that you get to even like essentially share the air, so to speak, of things that happened long before you were even born. Like either of us were even born, but still, I mean, that's always my vibe with New York, because I'm such a lover of like the Andy Warhol factory scene and the early days of punk and CBGBs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And even though most of the physical structures and for like jazz too, like, the blue note's still there, but it's, to me, I consider it more, it's almost more of an amusement park ride than the actual probably what it was. And then there's, the hundreds of other jazz clubs that were there, throughout like the golden age of bop and all that. Physically, all that stuff is gone. Like it doesn't exist. The buildings don't exist, or they've been completely razed over. I mean, CBGB's is a boutique now. That whole neighborhood is unrecognizable to what, someone like me who like idealized it as. But there's still something about just sharing the air.
Yeah, I mean, certainly New York has like a very special energy. And there's something to say, like literally anything you could possibly want at any hour of the day, it is yours. Like you can have it.
Yeah. You can just walk to it.
Yeah, which to me has been like super crazy. Yeah, I mean, also one very joyful thing has been like there is a very large Latin American population in New York, and things that I had struggled with in the past, like, oh, my name is Laura, like, that is not a big deal in New York for people.
Yeah.
Like at the Starbucks, it's not a big deal. And that for me has been, like, super special, like, at my job. Like, my boss is also from Colombia, and, like, we speak in Spanish all day. So I feel like in many ways, like, much more connected to my own culture.
Because you can feel like you're losing it a little bit. And that's just life. I mean, because if you're not living there, like where you're from, sort of ground zero for you, you can lose it. Just like anyone can lose anything anytime they leave wherever it is where they're from. Even if you're American, you just don't live in the place where you're from.
Yeah.
You can lose. You can feel like you're like you're losing grasp of it. So it's great to sort of re-engage with some version of like your culture's diaspora.
Yeah.
And New York's great again because New York you can have that experience across hundreds of cultures all within New York City, and
exactly.
it is pretty great. Yeah,
so that has been really awesome. And again, my coworker is from Taiwan, so like again, like just I feel like I'm in a very multicultural environment. We're all bilingual. Like, it's just a completely different vibe and energy that I feel like I had always been searching for. And like the fact that I use both languages at work consistently is like such a beautiful thing.
Yeah. It's gotta, like I say, you're tapping in all the things that are you, not one particular, like speaking Spanish alone is not just you.
Yeah.
Speaking English alone is not just you. Any of these things. It's like, it's the whole thing. It's like, I'm a person. I contain multitudes.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. So I feel like New York has really allowed me to, again, to just exist as myself, which is awesome. And
then it's gonna be fun when you come back here, because like, you know all this.
Yeah.
And some things change, and then some things don't change at all. But it's fun to kind of experience, maybe almost like a time lapse.
Yeah.
Where you,
well, I mean.
And it hasn't been that long.
It hasn't been that long either, but yeah, for sure. Like little things change, and you kind of notice. But it's not like because I come back so frequently, it doesn't like hurt in any way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And part of the juice is getting older too. Like even if you stayed, like getting older, you start to develop a little bit of that time lapse too. Yeah. Where like when I was driving up to come meet with you, and I went up away through a neighborhood I used to live in. I haven't lived in 8 years, and just driving up and just being like, oh,
what's happening?
What's all this thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or when I jump in an Uber and it takes me somewhere, and it takes me through another part of a neighborhood where I'm like, well, I had friends who used to live here 15 years ago, but none of that's here anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just part of it's just getting old. I mean, because as you do your life and all that, you kind of narrow your gaze. Like you start focusing. People partner off, families, careers, etc. And you're not like your young self anymore, just kind of like bopping around the city like a pinball. Like you start to have your things. This is where I live, this is where I work, these are the 2 to 3 places that I go to eat, and then that's about it. And you try not to get that way. And you swear up and down that you're not going to do it, but then you do.
You do, yeah.
You start to narrow your scope of what it is that you're going to do and not do.
And I hear you. I hear that piece about like your peers. I think like one thing that I have has been a bit shocking for me is like right now I'm in that period where like everybody's getting married and having children, and well, I'm engaged, so I am getting married, but
good stuff.
But yeah, I feel like how different my life is from my peers sometimes is a bit shocking, specifically because I chose this path, right? And sometimes I like, you use like your peers as like a measure of how you're doing in your life, right? Like, because it's like kind of like sets the pace for you.
Well, because at one point they're your peers for a reason, and you were all kind of at this one place together, more equal, and then as time goes on, it's that splintering.
Yeah.
It's part, like I said, this is me. This is all of me.
And I think it's like, it's your career, right? And it's just like people choose to be whatever, nurses, doctors, whatever they may choose to be. I think like being an artist, it's not funny, but like it's interesting how much it has affected also like my decisions about like my life, right? Like I've made the choice to not have any children ever. Yeah. And part of that, what big reason behind that is because I'm an artist, and I think that like my albums, my art, my artistic practice, it is kind of like my baby, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's a thing you're gonna leave behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I that like bringing children into the world is not something that causes me a lot of anxiety, and not something that I would ever want to do.
I was the same way. Yeah, same thing. I was like, at least as a man, like I can kind of shrug it off, or it doesn't really get asked of me. But for you, like, or for women in general, it probably gets asked way more by strangers in situations that seem completely inappropriate, because they are. Yes,
for sure. Again, going back to the like, for who?
Yes, exactly. For who? For you?
Yeah.
You're gonna pay for it and raise it? You're gonna watch it while I'm on tour? Exactly. Yeah. No, as I meet young people, or younger people than me, who say things like that, make those decisions, like I always find it very important for me to be like, there's nothing wrong with the decision you're making. Absolutely not. For what it's worth, coming from me. Well, this is great, Laura.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me again.
Oh yeah,
It's
thanks
lovely
for
to chat again.
Yeah, and to do it in person. This is good.
Yeah, it's definitely a sign that things are better.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you so much.
We'll be together till the end of time. 25
Well, that's the show for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Laura Lizcano, for talking, for having me over, for sitting at the kitchen table and doing it old school, face to face, talking in the room. Great to talk to her, to meet her in person for the first time. The record is called Daughter of the Sea. It is out now, available everywhere you get digital music. Head on over to lauralizcano.bandcamp.com. Get yourself your digital copy. Go to lauralizcanomusic.com. You sign up for her email list and find out about her dates coming up. Like I said at the top, October 23rd in New York is her album release show at Groove, and November 12th here in Philadelphia is her album release at City Winery. Go back and check out that episode 182. It's the first time I talked to her if you haven't already. It'll fill in the blanks, some of the stuff you might not know about her. Check out her record before this one too, Heart. I really enjoy it. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with a song of hers. It's sort of two songs. It all goes together. We talk a lot in the conversation about the string quartet interludes, so I didn't want to play some of her music without including even just a small selection of that, because like I said, it's a really cool, unique part of the record, and I really enjoy it, and I like how it sort of ties songs together, narratively moves things together. A lot of that is probably just me as a listener filling in the blanks, but it's a very cool thing that people do on records sometimes, is to have these little instrumental interludes in between songs. So I wanted to include it. So what I'm going to play for you, her song Quiet Love, which we had talked about in the conversation. And leading into that is the first interlude on the record, just a short little string quartet snippet going into the song. So that's what you're going to hear from her brand new album, Daughter of the Sea, Laura Lizcano. Great to have her on the show. Enjoy this tune from her, Quiet Love. My name is Dan Drago. Both those names, Dan Drago. I don't know why I punctuated them like that. It's 25 o'clock, Philadelphia's longest running music podcast, I think. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Enjoy the music from Laura Lizcano.
Place your lips upon my skin. Kiss the stretch marks on my hips. They run like rivers to the sea. They run like rivers, wild and free. Oh, twist the knots and silver threads. They shine like moonlight on the sea. They shine like moonlight, wild and free. Oh, quiet love, burning softly through the night. Oh, will you stay with me until the morning light? Twist your legs around with mine in that ancient sacred dance. We move move like waves upon the sea. We move like waves, so wild and free. Oh.